Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's quick review for The Leftovers Season 1. This video is a part of a series of videos where I give a quick spoiler-free review of a television show currently airing. This series is mostly meant for those who haven't seen the show and are trying to gauge whether or not they want to watch it. However, those who have seen it will know more about what I'm talking about. This review is about Season 1 of The Leftovers, which is a show that aired on HBO over a year ago, and Season 2 is scheduled to air this coming October. The Leftovers was based off a novel by Tom Peretta, who was also involved in writing the show with Damon Lindelof, who is most well known for being a co-producer on Lost, and for writing such films as Star Trek Into Darkness, Prometheus, and Tomorrowland. The show often gets referred to as a typical Lindelof project, as it displays many of the themes common in his works, most notably having a lot of mysteries that seem to make no sense and are likely to never be answered. I myself have criticized Lost, and Lindelof in particular, for his inability to provide satisfying resolutions to that show. In particular, I complained about how towards the end of the series, when confronted about the dissatisfaction over the lack of resolutions to the many mysteries of the shows raised, he would state that the answers are unimportant as the show was all about the characters, an answer I found to be inherently flawed, as clearly the show was not simply about the characters, and it was always more than that, and to state that it was simply an excuse for an inability to come up with satisfying resolutions. To illustrate my point, I compared Lost to actual character shows like Dawson's Creek, Downton Abbey, and Grey's Anatomy, and pointed out the huge difference between them. However, this time around, it seems Lindelof has curtailed such criticism by making The Leftovers actually be all about the characters from the very beginning, where I could easily give The Leftovers as another example to compare to Lost to demonstrate that Lost wasn't all about the characters. The Leftover takes place several years after a mysterious event known as the Departure, where 2% of the world's population instantly vanishes with no explanation. It follows the lives of those affected by the departure and what effect it had on humanity. In particular, it follows a family, a father and his daughter, Kevin and Jill Garvey. Kevin is the typical hero type character, as he is the sheriff of the small town in which the show takes place, but he's quite a flawed character who is more flawed than most flawed heroes, such as Jack from Lost and Rick from The Walking Dead. But overall, I found Kevin to be a much more complex and interesting character than those other characters. And then there's Jill, who is in the first season was always hanging around her best friend, Amy, and the two of them reminded me so much of the two girls from the film American Beauty, as Jill was the awkward, depressed, and antisocial teenager, and Amy was the pretty, popular, ditzy girl. I could not help during the series run but to think of them as the American Beauty girls. The show had a large cast of diverse characters ranging from unique and interesting to cliched and ordinary. In particular, I was quite fond of a character of Nora Durst, who lost her husband and two children to the departure. And the character I was least fond of was Kevin's father, the former sheriff, who had since gone insane, as I found scenes with him to be quite typical and boring. It's funny listening to others review the show, as they often talk about the many mysteries involved and a desire to have answers, but I never look at the show in that way. In fact, I think if you're looking at it that way, you're doing it wrong. The show isn't all about the mysteries, it's about the character interactions and how they react to those mysteries. For example, there are several cults that are a major factor in Season 1, the main one being a cult called the Guilty Remnant. They take a vow of silence and chain smoke and go around staring at people until they join their cult. Why do they do this? I have no idea, but unlike others, I don't really care. I found that many of the storylines and that pertain to each episode about the character interactions and character stories were far more interesting than the actual mysteries, and whenever something weird or inexplicable happens, I just go with it, and I find that you enjoy the show much more if you look at it that way. It kind of reminds me of the film 12 Monkeys, which I reviewed, where there's a guy in a cell who's constantly talking to James Cole, the main character, and you never know who this guy is, where is he from, is he a figment of his imagination, is he from the future, who is this guy? This is never answered in the movie, and to me it never needs to be answered, because it doesn't matter what the ultimate answer is. And I'd look at The Leftovers the same way, as it doesn't really matter why the guilty remnant chain smoke, or why some random person in a car pulls up to Kevin and says some weird shit. It just helps push forward the story, and to answer the specific reasons is beside the point. In fact, if there's one problem I had with season 1, is that they focused a bit too much on these cults, as personally I had never been that interested in cults in general, and don't think they'd be that big of a thing if something like this were to occur. There was also a side story taking place elsewhere in the country involving Kevin's son that apparently many people hated, as it was disconnected to everything else happening in the show. Personally, I didn't have a problem with this storyline. It wasn't my favorite, but I didn't hate it either. So my rating for The Leftovers Season 1 is an 8, extremely good. Overall, this show could alternate between being cliched, boring, interesting, exciting, and intense, but ultimately throughout it all, the show contained great interpersonal relations with fully fleshed out characters you always want to follow, and a beautiful soundtrack on top of that. And those who are familiar with my channel know how much a good soundtrack goes to winning me over. So, will I watch the next season? The answer here is yes, although I've heard that only a few characters in Season 1 will be in Season 2, as apparently they are moving to a town in Texas where no departures occurred. So that makes me a bit skeptical, as typically when a show changes drastically like this, it usually tends to not be as good, but I will definitely watch it to find out. In fact, I have even considered perhaps doing weekly reviews of each episode as it airs, but most likely I'll wait until the season finishes to do a full review on the entire season. In fact, I may do a more detailed review on Season 1 at some point. However, if you would like me to do a review for each episode, leave a comment below and let me know, because I'll be more likely to do it if I know there's interest. So that's it for my quick review on The Leftovers Season 1. I'll be back here every Monday for a quick review on a show currently airing, so make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with all that, and thanks a lot for watching.